I missed this interview with Bill Maher, and I thought I'd bring it to you. He goes over, the division on the right and the left. I'm John Mike Keane.
He's become crotchety. He's become one of those old guys who says,
Really?
the kids are crazy. It was better in my day. What do you say to them?
They're wrong. I mean, they're wrong, and the kids are crazy. It's interesting. They have this idea, the younger generation, maybe every generation does, that just because something is new makes it better. And that's not true. New is not synonymous with better.
But you're sounding like an old-fashioned conservative.
You sound like an old-fashioned conservative. Bill Maher has been more open to conservatism and more attacking of liberalism than ever before.
I heard a couple of people say, or maybe they wrote it online, that, well, I'm a hypocrite because you were for the demonstrators in 1968 or whatever it was when they were demonstrating against the Vietnam War. Yeah, that was very different. First of all, the students weren't against their own. These students were threatening other students. That didn't happen in the Vietnam War. And being against the Vietnam War made sense. It was a war that we probably should not have been in.
But let me ask you...
This is demonstrating and protesting for a terrorist group.
So just to say that, Bill Maher says what no Democrat politician will say. So I have to honor that here.
But the whole tradition of this kind of expansion of rights, it's messy, it's chaotic. There's probably a bunch of excess, as there probably was in the 60s. There was the Black Panthers and the Weathermen and things like that.
Oh, the Weathermen. And he also didn't mention J6 and just dismiss them all as a little excess. The Weathermen had terrorist bombings on U.S. soil. And they act like, oh, that was just, the peaceniks.
But they think of you as somebody who was, you were okay with all that, but you've turned.
I haven't turned. Yes, people have said to me, you make fun of the left more than you used to. And guilty, I have, because the left has changed. Now, the right has changed also, and even worse. I mean, the right doesn't believe in democracy anymore.
Oh, see. The old Democrats still came out of Bill Maher, even as the Democrat Party, who has undermined democracy by installing Kamala Harris against the votes for Joe Biden.
But it's not like the left hasn't changed also. So I'm going to call it out wherever I see it. I mean, there are things that have to do with gender and race and free speech, ideas about, you can be healthy at any weight, and gender is always a social construct, and maybe we should give communism another try, and maybe we should get rid of capitalism and the border patrol, and let's tear down statues of Lincoln and get rid of the police. Just, no. It's not that I've gotten old, it's that your ideas are stupid.
Their ideas are stupid, but notice how long the laundry list is that he can give about Democrats' looniness. He could have gone on 100 more points, and he had to really stretch to find something against the Republicans by going after Trump.
Basis of it is we started to hate each other. I mean, you mentioned Ronald Reagan. Famously, he used to have a drink at the end of the day, often with Tip O'Neill, who was the leader in the House and the Democrat, but they were just two Irish pals who could get together and have a scotch at the end of the day. They knew they weren't going to get along on many issues, but they didn't hate each other. They could drink together. That is inconceivable today. Can you imagine Joe Biden having a drink with Mike Johnson? It just would never happen.
Because they'd have to put the drink in Joe Biden's IV pick. I don't think Reagan would have sat down with Tip O'Neill and had a drink if Tip O'Neill was for removing a baby the day before it was born. If Tip O'Neill was for taking children away from their parents to make decisions about a certain surgery. I don't think he would have had a drink with Tip O'Neill if the Democrats were as hostile as they are today. It's the Democrats' hostility that causes the right to fight. And we don't fight the way they do. We don't do what they do. We have not tried to imprison our opponent, and they have only tried to imprison their opponents. And that requires a bigger fight from the right.
When you hate people, you don't listen to them. So it doesn't matter how reasonable they might be. We have reached this place where each side thinks the other side is an existential threat. You hear that term from both sides all the time. That is just a terrible place to be.
It's a terrible place to be, but it's reality. If the left really is an existential threat, what would he expect us to do? And we've already heard the left say that about Trump, that he is an existential threat. So if it's true, maybe that's why they're angry, is because of the rhetoric.
We find ourselves in this situation where both sides are literally siding with enemies of America rather than the opposition party within the country. I mean, you see Republican MAGA people with T-shirts that say, "I'd rather be with Russia than Democrats." I mean, Trump stood with Putin against our intelligence agencies.
What party is standing with illegals coming over the border? They're not national citizens. Gavin Newsom just passed a thing that gives them $150,000 home head start. People find strange bedfellows. You know, look at Trump allying with JFK Jr. Trump has found common ground, fighting to keep Cornel West on the ballot. It's very transactional, but it's also weird that Bill Maher would say that about just MAGA, that we're somehow more into tying with other nations. It's the Democrat Party that always says they want to rebuild our reputation with the outside world, that they're very ashamed of how we act. They're the ones who have allegiances, certainly with Tim Walz, to China.
Fox News literally uses Russian talking points. I mean, Tucker Carlson went over there.
Wait, Tucker Carlson went over there, and he went over there to sit down with Putin. He sat down and talked to him and had an interview. He didn't agree with him.
And on the left, you see them marching for Hamas, a terrorist organization.
And which is worse, to march for a terrorist organization, which also is not American, by the way, it's a foreign country, or that he sat down and interviewed Putin? That's like the best Bill Maher can do to try to play both sides and say both sides are equally guilty, and they're not.
I don't know what it is. I mean, I think this goes back to the Supreme Court fights that we had, like in the, was it late 80s or early 90s? This goes back a long way, so it's going to take a long way to get back to some sort of normalcy. I don't know. Sometimes you have to hit bottom before you can go back to the top. I don't know what that means in this country.
So he used the battle at the Supreme Court, but he can only show two Republican nominees, Bork and Clarence Thomas, to show where all the hatred came from. It was specifically what the Democrat Party did to them. They broke the rules. They started it. And so you can't just keep going after the people who defend themselves or fight back. We didn't cause the division and polarization. They started it, and they're not going to stop continuing it if we stop fighting. I'm John Mike Keene.